and the paranoia and all of these thoughts, these fearful thoughts, started to affect my sense of reality. But my husband was trying to like understand. He felt like maybe I just needed to rest. He didn't think anything was wrong like that. He knew I was tired. He knew I was kind of acting a little strange, but he thought it was more so just like, she doesn't want anybody touching the baby. I know how she was. She was like that with the oldest, that kind of thing. But not that, oh, she doesn't recognize me, It wasn't until one Sunday he had to leave to go to church, and he left me at the house with the baby, and my mom had come back in town by this time. And I told him that I needed my assistant to come, my office manager to come to the house to be with me. In my head at that moment when I said that to him, I was saying it from a perspective of, because this is how quickly things went. It was like a span of 3 days that it peaked to this point. I was talking to him in that moment when he said he was going to church. I told him that that I needed someone to be with me while he's away. And I just thought like I was some type of royalty. And this is like that grandiose spirit. Like I'm something important. I needed someone with me to help me clean up and to take care of the babies while I rested. That's what I thought, in my head while he's away, and to keep us safe, And this person's last name is Butler. And my mind told me that she's my butler. And so I wanted her to come over so that she can do the butler duties. Like, it's amazing how the mind works. My mind really was trying to make sense of things. So she comes over and she helps me with the baby. And then we began talking, and I remember sharing with her how I appreciate her for loving me and supporting me. This is the Caucasian woman that works for me, by the way. Thank her for holding it down for me when things were tough, and letting her know that, we're going to make it, and I'm always going to make sure she's taken care of, her and her family, and I don't care that she's white. Like, I started talking about that kind of stuff. And this stuff is important for me to share because part of my trauma in my career has been in every aspect of dentistry. Starting with not ever seeing a Black dentist, but then going into a profession where you are judged in minutia, millimeters. I was already dealing with perfectionism and trying to control everything, and then you go into a profession that requires that much of you. I was always on pins and needles, and I never experienced anxiety until all of the things happened in 2021 where I started to have panic attacks and things like that. I didn't feel like I experienced anxiety, I should say. I didn't have the complete symptoms. I started to have heart palpitations and things around that time. But I remember that during my career, even in dental school, I was the only Black student. So I always dealt with that post-traumatic slave disorder and the microaggressions and racism and prejudice and imposter syndrome. And so then you take that, you internalize it, but you keep pressing forward, and then you go into a profession in a state that lacks diversity. And I work for people who undermined my authority. They were employees that were supposed to be subservient to my position, but I never treated them as anything less. But they always treated me as if my credentials should be questioned. I'm not really a doctor. I'm not old enough. I dealt with a lot. And the repeated offense was from white women. So you carry that from all of the associate positions I had. And then you get to my practice, and I have this one white woman who's so allegiant to me, and she'll never betray me. And then on this day, I tell her this. And I started to get paranoid about her because I knew that she carried a gun. And so I told her when she came into my room that she needs to put her gun outside the door. And she asked me why, and I said, just do it. So she did. And I guess she left her cell phone somewhere, so it was put away. And I started talking to her about living for Christ and how I know people say that white people are snakes. And I don't believe that she's a snake. But in that moment, she had a snake tattoo on her ankle. And I flipped. I told her that you are a snake. You're an imposter. You're a betrayer. You're not who you say you are. And I told her that in order for her to be in my presence, she needed to give her life to Christ. And, I talked about how he died on the cross for our sins. And, he was bruised and for our iniquities and, murdered for our transgressions. And would she give her only begotten son? And she thought I meant I was going to try and kill her son. And it just turned into this big old thing. I'm saying all these things out of my mind, just grandiose spiritual battle going on. And she got completely offended and terrified that in me trying to put my hand on her face or forehead to pray for her like this, she thought I was trying to hit her because she had her eyes closed. And while this is happening, my oldest son is witnessing it. The baby's there, but he was a few weeks old, so he didn't know what was going on. But in that moment, she left the room in terror. She left, and I guess she went to the police station in terror. She left, and I guess she went to the police station and told them that I wanted to take her children and I tried to harm her. So the police came to my house. From the time she left up until the police came, it was maybe like spanning 30 minutes to an hour. And during that time, my family had me go lay down. They told me I needed to take a rest. I needed to go to sleep. My husband had come home in that time because my mother had called saying that she thinks something is going on because of the way that the office manager left my home. So they told me to rest, and I believed that I rested. But during this time, I was up for several days, like maybe a week. And so I get into bed and I lay down. I thought I went to sleep, but apparently I did not, because 5 minutes later I came downstairs and I hear my husband talking to someone at the front door, and it's the police officer. And the police officer comes in and they ask me if I knew who ex-butler was. And I tell them that I do. And the police officer mentioned something about my daughter, and I said, I don't have a daughter, I just have a son. And that was the extent that I remember. But then all I know is that my mind flashed from that experience with a police officer to my last experience with a police officer in my home, which was directly related to the sexual abuse I endured as a child. And all of a sudden, that particular incident took me back to that place. And so now you have it to where I forgot that I was a wife and a mother. I forgot that I was a dental practice owner. I forgot that I was a dentist, a doctor of dental medicine. I forgot like all these things about myself, and I just became that little girl who was fearful in that moment when the police came to take the police report after sharing that I was being sexually abused. So my family realizes that something's not right based off of the answers that I give the police officers. And that's when they start calling my therapist. They start calling my midwife. They start calling the postpartum doula to get some type of support as to what to do and what's going on. And I guess my mother had made an appointment with my obstetrics and midwifery clinic that I was going to, but the appointment wasn't until the following week. But in the meantime, I would not sleep. So they sent me to my grandparents' home, and they took me, and that's where that car ride came into play, where my little boy was wearing a shirt that said little brother, and my big boy was wearing a shirt that said big brother, and I'm sitting in the middle, and I thought I was the little sister, as I am in real life, because my mind was stuck at that 9-year-old space. I get to my grandparents' house, and their house triggered me so bad because they have like a lot of technology. Like their sink goes off from sensory, their refrigerator be doing stuff, like everything is like technology galore, right? So I had a hard time being at my grandparents' house. I was scared to walk outside. I thought like I was always being monitored. So they decided that it would be best for me to go to a behavioral health facility. So they told me that they were taking me somewhere to get help. And during this time, I thought that they were speaking to me in code, like letting me know that, my office manager and the lady who I let go from my office were in cahoots with one another, and they were after me. They were trying to harm me, because I remembered that my office manager at the time, back in the day, she would tell me that, her family had dealt with some racism stuff, and she had a relative who was a police force captain of some sort, and he didn't like Black people and tried to pull them over for various things that were unfounded. And so all these things were in my mind.